Melissa always had a way of presenting terrible ideas like they were enlightened, modern breakthroughs. When she first suggested opening our marriage, she sold it like a progressive, adult solution to stagnation. We were sitting in our living room, wine glasses half full, her eyes shining like she'd just solved world hunger. "Adrian," she said, brushing her hair back with practiced drama, "you and I are strong enough to handle this. We love each other, but we've both changed. We both want more than what monogamy can offer. Imagine the honesty we'll have if we stop pretending we're enough for each other." I didn't answer right away. Melissa had always been bolder, louder, the one who filled silences with big declarations. Me? I needed time to process. But she kept talking, selling this like a luxury vacation package. "It's not about leaving you," she insisted. "It's about setting each other free while staying together. We can explore, have new experiences, and still come home to what's real." It sounded insane, but I'd been married to Melissa long enough to know when she'd already made up her mind. Saying no would only make me the insecure, controlling husband she claimed not to have. I told myself if this was what she needed to stay happy, maybe it was worth trying. Within weeks, Melissa dove headfirst into her new freedom. She started going out more, dressing like she was back in her 20s, and bringing home stories about connections she was making. She said names I'd never heard before: Evan, Lauren, Sasha, like they'd been lifelong friends. Whenever I asked if any of these new connections were men, she'd smirk and say, "Even if they are, Adrian, why does it matter? We agreed to this." What she really meant was, she had agreed to this, and I was just supposed to smile and nod. At first, I didn't even consider stepping outside the marriage myself. Melissa's idea had been her solution, not mine. I kept my head down, worked, came home to half-empty wine bottles and vague explanations of late nights. Every time I hinted at unease, she flipped it back on me. "You're free to do whatever you want," she'd say. "If you're not, that's on you. Don't make me feel guilty because you can't handle your own options." It became clear Melissa didn't just want freedom, she wanted immunity. She wanted me to sit quietly while she rewrote the rules. Months passed, and Melissa's double life flourished. She'd take weekend trips, claiming girls' retreats, but I wasn't an idiot. I saw Evan Price's name pop up on her phone. I overheard giggles and whispers when she thought I was asleep. I knew exactly what was happening, but I said nothing. Then, one rainy Thursday, something shifted. I was grabbing coffee downtown when a stranger struck up a conversation in line. Rachel Morgan. She wasn't flashy or loud, just calm, warm, the kind of person who makes you feel like the world's noise fades a little when they talk. We chatted for 5 minutes that morning and ended up sitting on a park bench 2 hours later, still talking. I didn't cross any lines that day. I didn't cross any for weeks. But Rachel saw something in me Melissa hadn't looked at in years, a man who mattered. She asked about my work, my hobbies, my thoughts, not just what I could do for her. Melissa noticed the change before I ever admitted it to myself. She saw me smiling at texts that weren't from her. She saw me leaving the house with purpose instead of staying home waiting for her return. And that's when the woman who had demanded freedom suddenly couldn't stand the thought of me having it too. One night, as I was heading out to meet Rachel for dinner, Melissa stood in the doorway, blocking my exit. "Who is she?" she demanded. I kept my voice even. "A friend." Melissa's laugh was sharp, bitter. "You think you can just start seeing someone? That's not what this was supposed to be." I stared at her, stunned by the hypocrisy. "You're serious? You've been sleeping with Evan for months." Her eyes widened, not in shame, but in rage. "That's different. I didn't fall in love with him." The argument exploded, Melissa throwing accusations and threats like grenades. By the end of the night, one thing was crystal clear. She'd only wanted an open marriage as long as I stayed faithful. She'd wanted permission to betray me without consequence, to rewrite our vows while I played the dutiful husband. But that man was gone. From that moment on, I started planning. Melissa thought she could destroy me if she couldn't control me. She had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. Melissa's rage didn't simmer down after that night. It turned nuclear. She stopped pretending that the open marriage was mutual and started attacking from every angle. At home, she berated me for ruining everything. To our friends, she whispered that I had become someone else, painting me as unstable and cruel. I kept my cool. Melissa thrived on drama. It fueled her ability to twist the narrative. but I'd spent too many years letting her dictate the story of our marriage. This time, I stayed silent and started collecting every piece of evidence I could find. Melissa was sloppy with her secrets. She left messages from Evan on her tablet, love notes hidden in plain sight on the kitchen counter, and even receipts from weekends they'd spent together in upscale hotels. She didn't care enough to hide it anymore because she thought I was too timid to act. But while she was busy spinning lies to friends, I was meeting with lawyers. They showed me how to untangle myself financially, protect my business assets, and secure the house we'd shared. Melissa had assumed she'd destroy me if I dared to leave. She didn't know I'd already built a legal shield that would leave her empty-handed. Rachel became my anchor during those weeks. She wasn't pushing me toward anything. She just listened. She never once suggested I rush into divorce or retaliate against Melissa. Instead, she reminded me of something I hadn't felt in years: calm, quiet confidence. It was that confidence that made Melissa spiral further. She couldn't stand that I wasn't begging her to stay or throwing jealous fits. So she escalated. One Friday night, Melissa called me while out with friends, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You know, Adrian," she said loudly enough for background laughter to bleed through, "maybe if you were half the man Evan is, we wouldn't need this open marriage." She wanted a reaction. I gave her none. Later, I found out she'd told mutual friends that I was emotionally abusive, that I had forced her into the arrangement she'd begged me for. Normally, that might have destroyed me socially. But Melissa had underestimated me again. I had saved every text message, every email, every smug little admission where she'd said this open marriage was her idea. One night, Rachel and I were having dinner when my lawyer called. "Adrian," he said, "we're ready. We can file whenever you're sure." I glanced across the table at Rachel. She wasn't smiling or urging me one way or another. She just looked at me with quiet understanding, as if to say, "This is your choice, not hers, not anyone else's." That weekend, while Melissa was away, no doubt with Evan, I signed every paper. Divorce, asset protection, the whole exit strategy we'd been building for weeks. When Melissa came home Sunday night, suitcase still dusted with sand from her beach trip, I was waiting with a calm she didn't recognize. "What's this?" she demanded when I slid the folder toward her. "Freedom," I said evenly. "The kind you wanted." She rifled through the papers, her face shifting from confusion to disbelief to fury. "You can't just do this," she shouted. "You think you can throw away our marriage and walk away clean?" I met her glare without flinching. "Melissa, you did that the night you asked for an open marriage. I'm just making it official." She screamed, cursed, threw the folder across the room, but I stayed composed. For years, I had been her safety net, the man who absorbed every outburst, every betrayal. Now, she was watching that net vanish beneath her feet. Melissa thought she could rewrite the rules of our marriage and keep me as her loyal fallback. She thought wrong, and she had no idea just how far I was willing to go to make sure she never controlled me again. Melissa didn't sign the papers right away. She stormed out of the house that night, slamming doors and vowing to make sure I regretted this. But when she came back 2 days later, suitcase in hand, she wasn't ready to fight. She was ready to manipulate. She walked into the kitchen wearing that same calculated smile she used when negotiating deals in her marketing job. "Adrian," she said softly, setting her suitcase down, "maybe we rushed this. Maybe we just need counseling. We've invested so many years together. We can fix this." I didn't even look up from my laptop. "Melissa, this isn't a rush. It's reality. We've been over for a long time." Her tone sharpened. "This is about her, isn't it? That woman you've been sneaking around with. You think she's going to replace me?" I finally met her eyes, calm and steady. "This isn't about anyone else. This is about you deciding marriage meant everything for you and nothing for me. You wanted freedom. You got it. Now you just don't like that I'm not under your thumb anymore." Melissa's face twisted, rage bubbling beneath her polished exterior. She wasn't used to me standing firm. Normally, an argument like this would end with me apologizing just to stop the yelling. Not this time. "I'm not signing anything," she snapped. "You think you can just kick me out and keep everything for yourself? I'll destroy you before I let you win." I closed my laptop, slid a small folder across the table, and leaned back in my chair. Inside were printed copies of her texts to Evan, hotel receipts, and even a voice message where she bragged to a friend about how Evan is the reason Adrian finally feels alive. Go ahead, I said evenly. Fight it. Everything you've done is documented. The lawyers already have it. You want to drag this through court? You'll walk away with even less than you think. For the first time since this war began, Melissa went silent. She stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. She wasn't stupid. She knew leverage when she saw it. That night, she called Evan. I heard the muffled conversation through the thin walls. She was begging him to stand by her if the divorce got messy. From her tone, I could tell she was realizing something I'd suspected for months. Evan had no intention of being her permanent escape. 2 days later, Savannah Mallory, Evan's sister, called me out of the blue. Adrian, Savannah said awkwardly. I don't know if you want to hear this, but Evan, he's already seeing someone else. Melissa isn't it for him. She never was. I thanked Savannah for telling me, but felt no surprise. This was exactly how I knew it would end for Melissa. She'd gambled everything on a man who saw her as nothing more than a thrill, and now the walls were closing in. Meanwhile, Rachel and I continued quietly seeing each other. She never asked for details about the divorce, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. With her, there was no chaos, no power games, just peace. For the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to be valued for who I was, not for what I could endure. Melissa must have sensed it. One evening, as I was leaving to meet Rachel, she stood by the door with tears streaming down her face. Adrian, she whispered, voice cracking. We don't have to end like this. I'll stop seeing Evan. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't throw me away. I looked at her for a long moment. This was the woman who had mocked me for months, told me I wasn't enough, flaunted her affairs under the guise of freedom. And now, faced with losing everything, she wanted me to save her. I'm not throwing you away, Melissa, I said quietly. You jumped. When I closed the door behind me, I knew it was the first time in our marriage I'd truly walked out on my own terms. Melissa's desperation only grew after that night. She alternated between sobbing apologies and furious outbursts, pacing the house like a cornered animal. Every conversation was another attempt to claw back control, not because she wanted me, but because she couldn't stand the thought of losing. A week later, she switched tactics again. I came home to find a fancy dinner set on the table. Candles, wine, her favorite playlist humming softly in the background. She wore the same red dress she'd worn on our anniversary years ago. I remember when we used to be happy, she said as I stood in the doorway. Before all this nonsense. We can get back there, Adrian. We can forget everything and start over. I didn't move from the doorway. Melissa, you've spent months telling me I wasn't enough, that you needed other men to feel alive. You can't cook a steak and expect me to forget that. Her smile faltered, replaced by cold anger. So that's it. You're going to throw away our marriage because you finally got attention from some woman who doesn't know the real you. That's rich, I said, walking past her to pour myself a drink. You opened this marriage for yourself, not me. You dragged me through hell and expected me to wait like a loyal dog while you figured out if I was worth keeping. You don't get to play the victim now. Melissa slammed her hands on the table, rattling the silverware. You're not divorcing me. I won't let you. You can't just erase me from your life like this. I set down my glass and looked her dead in the eye. Melissa, you did that yourself. I'm just finally following through. She stormed out again that night, but this time she didn't go to Evan. I knew because Savannah called the next day. She showed up at Evan's place, Savannah said, her voice dripping with irritation, but he told her to leave. He's done with her. Adrian, I'm not on anyone's side here, but you should know she's unraveling. That didn't surprise me. Melissa had built her world on control, controlling me, controlling her lovers, controlling the story she told everyone else. Now, with Evan gone and her grip on me slipping away, she was left with nothing to manipulate. Meanwhile, my lawyers finalized the divorce settlement. Every asset Melissa thought she'd have leverage over was locked down. The house would remain mine, my business untouched, and her claims of emotional abuse crumbled under the weight of her own messages and admissions. When I finally handed her the final papers to sign, Melissa barely glanced at them. She just stared at me with hollow eyes and said, I thought you'd fight for me. I shook my head. Melissa, you spent a year making sure there was nothing left worth fighting for. She signed without another word. The day she moved out, Rachel came by to help me pack Melissa's leftover clothes. As we boxed up the remnants of a marriage built on deception and selfishness, I realized something. Melissa had never really wanted an open marriage for growth or honesty. She'd wanted a license to betray me without consequence. But consequences had finally caught up to her. A week after Melissa left, Savannah called again, almost sounding amused. "She's burning bridges everywhere," Savannah said. "Friends won't take her calls. Evan's moved on, and she's ranting online about how you trapped her with the divorce. People aren't buying it. They saw what she did to you." That night, I sat on the porch with Rachel. For the first time, I let myself exhale fully, like I'd been holding my breath for years. Melissa thought she could rewrite our marriage into her personal playground. She thought she could betray me endlessly and still have me to fall back on. She thought wrong. Melissa's departure didn't end with quiet acceptance. It spiraled into a spectacle. Within days, she began posting online about how I had trapped her in an unfair divorce settlement. She claimed I'd stolen the house, manipulated the courts, and used fabricated evidence to ruin her reputation. Her attempt at public sympathy backfired. People who had once entertained her stories started chiming in with their own experiences. Stories of seeing her with Evan long before the marriage was declared open, of overhearing her bragging about outsmarting me. Even a former coworker commented that Melissa had been planning her exit with benefits for months before we ever discussed non-monogamy. Rachel showed me some of the posts one evening while we sat in the living room. "She's grasping at straws," Rachel said, scrolling through the comments. "Look at this. No one believes her anymore." Sure enough, the responses were scathing. "We saw you with that guy in Miami long before Adrian knew anything. Sounds like you got played by your own game. He's better off without you." Melissa deleted most of her posts after that, retreating from the same online stage she had used to flaunt her freedom. But she wasn't done lashing out. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from her lawyer threatening to reopen negotiations for spousal support. The claim was laughable. Melissa had sabotaged her own marriage and had no legal ground to stand on. My attorney sent back a single-page response, a compilation of her own texts admitting to the affair with Evan and mocking me for not having the guts to leave. We never heard from her lawyer again. Meanwhile, Rachel and I continued to see each other quietly. There was no rush to define things or make grand declarations. She understood I needed time to rebuild myself, not as a man defined by betrayal, but as someone capable of choosing happiness again. One rainy Saturday, Savannah reached out one last time. "She's leaving town," Savannah said. "Packed up what little she had and moved in with some friend 3 states over." Evan cut her off completely. "She said you ruined her life, but honestly, she did that herself." I thanked Savannah for letting me know and hung up, feeling no anger, no satisfaction, just finality. That evening, I walked through the now quiet house. The walls, once echoing with arguments and slammed doors, felt calm. Melissa's lingering presence had finally lifted. I thought about the man I'd been at the start of our marriage, the one who would have begged Melissa to stay, who would have sacrificed everything just to keep her happy. That man had died the day Melissa proposed an open marriage under the guise of truth. What she really wanted was permission to betray me while keeping me as her safety net. But now she was gone, Evan was gone, and for the first time in years, I was standing on my own 2 feet. That night, Rachel and I cooked dinner together, nothing extravagant, just pasta and wine. As we ate, I realized something profound. Melissa had once accused me of not fighting for her. She was right. I hadn't fought for her. I had fought for me, and I'd won. The morning Melissa left town for good, I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun climb over the horizon. For years, I'd woken up to tension, Melissa's clipped comments, the sound of her suitcase zipping shut for another girl's trip, the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Now, there was only stillness. I didn't expect closure to feel like this. No dramatic showdowns, no cathartic yelling matches, no teary apologies that made everything okay. Just quiet. News traveled fast in our old social circle. Friends who had once believed Melissa's stories now reached out to me privately. One message summed it up perfectly. "We didn't know how bad it was, Adrian. She told us you were holding her back. Now we see she was just tearing you down to justify herself." Melissa's name faded from conversations over the next few weeks. People moved on. Evan moved on. Even Savannah, who'd called me more than once to apologize for introducing Melissa to her brother, stopped feeling the need to update me. It was as if Melissa had been erased from the life she once dominated. Meanwhile, My own life started to feel real again. I repaired my motorcycle, something Melissa used to mock as a waste of time. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years because she'd convinced me they were bad influences. I even took a weekend trip, no drama, no secrets, just me and the open road. Rachel joined me on one of those trips eventually. We didn't post pictures or announce anything. There was no performance, no need to prove anything to anyone. Being with her felt easy. I realized that's what had been missing all along. Ease, trust, mutual respect. One night, sitting by a campfire under the stars, Rachel asked, "Do you ever think about what you'd say to Melissa if you saw her again?" I poked at the fire with a stick, thought for a long moment, then shook my head. No, there's nothing left to say. She made her choice. I made mine. The rest doesn't matter anymore. Rachel nodded like she understood perfectly, because she did. Weeks later, my lawyer called to confirm the final paperwork had cleared. Everything was officially, irrevocably done. Melissa had no claim to anything, no path back to the life she'd thrown away. When I hung up the phone, I sat in the same living room where Melissa had once proposed her solution of an open marriage. I could still remember the self-satisfied way she told me we were strong enough to handle it. In reality, Melissa hadn't wanted strength or honesty. She'd wanted license to betray, to chase thrills while keeping me in her back pocket as a safety net. But safety nets aren't meant to last forever. Eventually, they get cut loose. And when Melissa finally let go, she thought I'd fall apart without her. Instead, I landed on my feet, free, unbroken, and moving forward into a life she could never touch again.